Today's episode of the Total Soccer Show is brought to you by Roughneck Scarves, the official scarf provider of U.S. Soccer, MLS, the USL, and the NCAA. They're also the creators of the Total Soccer Show Hello and Welcome scarf, which is, in and of itself, a sight to behold. On today's show, there's a lot of U.S. men's national team talk with a specific look towards the upcoming World Cup qualifying in March. If you're going to be attending those games, or you just want to show your support, Roughneck, that's Ruffneck, has got you covered with 14 different U.S.-themed scarves, eagles, and stars abound. You can also get 20% off your order by using the promo code Total Soccer Show. That's all one word, all uppercase, at checkout. That's roughneckscarves.com. Now on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Total Soccer Show. I'm Taylor Rockwell. I know I promised you that Daryl Grove would be back on the pod today, but that is not the case because I instead had the opportunity to talk with Alexi Lalas while he was stuck in traffic. We discussed his thoughts on Jordan Morris and Michael Bradley, what goes on during U.S. national team camps, and who could start in goal for the U.S. in March. Hint, it's maybe not who you think. So, without further ado, it's the man whose favorite Star Wars character is Han Solo. We found that out when he was on the show a while back. It's Alexi Lalas. Joining me on the line, I've got officially a friend of the show, since I think he's making probably his 8th or 9th appearance at this point. It's Alexi Lalas. Alexi, thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. Greetings from traffic. Ubiquitous, I know, but traffic in Los Angeles. I am sitting here in traffic making my way to the Fox Studios, and always a pleasure to talk to you. You guys, for a number of years now, have been a constant in my catalog and library of podcasts that I run to. I find myself in various points along my run agreeing or disagreeing or screaming out loud and scaring kids and people along the route. So thank you so much for all that you do each and every day now.
Well, we feel the same about you, but thank you for those kind words. Although I apologize because it does sound like, at least on one of our more recent episodes, we caused you a slight bit of emotional distress or mental anguish. Not saying that you should sue us, but just saying.
And I saw and I listened that you at least attempted to try to clean it up. But I love the fact that you stood your ground, and this all stems out of a recent podcast where I felt that you guys were a little hard on Jordan Morris. Not that he shouldn't be criticized, but the one guy who against Jamaica actually created chances, and obviously the one guy who actually scored, and what I think we all agree was an underwhelming performance. You guys were down on him, and I found myself at one point I was running through a wood chip trail, screaming at the wilderness, saying, "Come on, somebody stand up for poor Jordan Morris!" But it was fun. I mean, this is the good stuff. This is the good type of content you guys come out with. People don't have to agree. I could care less whether you agree or not. As a matter of fact, some of the best content sometimes is where people disagree.
Indeed. All right. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you, because I think you're right that maybe we were a little bit down on Jordan Morris, because I think overall, as I said on the most recent show, or the second most recent show, I think I was kind of down on the team as a whole because I had expectations that maybe rightly or wrongly were my own that maybe weren't met. But I wanted to talk specifically about Jordan Morris to start, at least. So, as you said, we were a little bit critical of that left foot, of maybe not playing the ball right back to Benny Feilhaber the way we thought of, maybe some of his movement. Obviously, you had a different interpretation of his game. So what were your thoughts on Jordan Morris?
Well, I think let's big picture it first. Anytime we talk now about the national team, I feel like we have to always couch it in, well, how would we talk about it if Jurgen Klinsmann did the same thing?
Yeah.
So I think first off, let's be honest and up front and say this is a Jurgen Klinsmann guy. All right, and this is somebody that Jurgen Klinsmann brought in. This is someone that Jurgen Klinsmann gave a tremendous amount of attention and confidence to, and I think that this is an exciting young player. When you look at what he did last year at Seattle, this isn't just some rookie sensation. This is a guy who came into arguably, and I would argue, the most pressure-filled type of scenario and market in Major League Soccer. This is a guy who I think in choosing Major League Soccer over going to Europe, and we know he was going to go to Germany, I think that there was more attention and more pressure and more expectation, and he came through with flying colors, and at a certain point took that Seattle team on his shoulders. And I know Lodeiro changed everything when he came in too, but a lot of credit, and I got a lot of time and I think praise and due praise and respect for what Jordan Morris did. Now, when it comes to the national team program, I don't think he's a starter yet, but I do think that he brings something different. I think that there's going to be a wonderful battle for time and hearts and minds when it comes to him and Bobby Wood and Josie Altidore, and now Clint Dempsey possibly back in the mix, at least in the future, because he's back playing. I didn't think that he had a great game, but I do think that in these types of games that we know notoriously are underwhelming, I think he did what he needs to do, which is score goals and get in positions to score. Would I prefer that he had a better left foot? Yeah, of course. But, nobody ever complained when Maradona was using his left foot constantly, and I'm not saying that Jordan Morris is Maradona, believe me. So save your letters and your tweets and your criticisms, all right? But I think right now he still remains, for me, a really interesting option, and one that I think Bruce Arena recognizes is something good to have in his arsenal.
So you're not saying he is Maradona, you're saying he's better than Diego Maradona. Got it. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. You can go ahead and resend those letters.
That's the hashtag, that's the lead and the quote that goes out there.
Perfect. So were there specific things that you saw him do in this game that you were impressed by or that you enjoyed that maybe you thought we didn't see? Or is it more about the things that you've seen him do over the course of his young career and you know what he can offer for the team?
Yeah, it's not specific to this game because this isn't some new guy. I mean, at the end of the game the other day, I said that, and once again, when we go back to this Jurgen Klinsmann compare and contrast, I said this is absolutely a result that Jurgen Klinsmann, but the way in which this result came about was specific to Bruce Arena because Jurgen Klinsmann did not have someone like a Benny Feilhaber in that type of setup. Now, Jurgen Klinsmann did have Jordan Morris. So what Jordan Morris is doing, I don't see him doing necessarily anything different right now under Bruce Arena. But it doesn't mean that he can't be a viable option, and he's not something that we should continue to be excited about. I think you and others really felt like you wanted to see something that gave you hope or a different kind of hope after these two games, and you didn't get that. And my point to you and others is I think you got what Bruce Arena is to a T. He is a pragmatist. This is not going to be about sexy type of soccer. This is not going to be about fundamentally changing the way that the game is played. This is going to be about results. And Bruce Arena is undefeated in his return to the national team and unscored upon. And ultimately, the only thing that matters is going to be that game at March. But how that game plays out from an aesthetic point of view is irrelevant to Bruce Arena. It's irrelevant to me because I've given up on that ghost. I've moved on and said, look, just get the points by hook or by crook. It really doesn't matter. And that's specifically why they hired Bruce Arena. Let's be honest.
And I think actually earlier you made a very good point that I think applies here, which is that you kind of look at this team, or at least I think we're looking at this team as sort of how would we have judged this team if it were coached by Jurgen Klinsmann? And I think if this were still Jurgen Klinsmann in charge, we look at that play, if it isn't Benny Feilhaber, it's somebody else, as maybe a lucky play. And I think you're making a very good point, which I had not previously really considered, which is that part of the reason why that goal was able to happen, even if it is maybe debatably a ball hit behind Benny Feilhaber, it's still Benny Feilhaber is the one who's playing that ball back. And that in of itself is a change that Arena has made that has obviously had a positive outcome.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce is going to get credit at times, and he's going to get criticism at times. But look, if a guy like Benny Feilhaber ultimately, when it comes down to the final moment and the deciding moment, even in an underwhelming game, Benny Feilhaber is there, then I think it's important to point that out because this is a player that a lot of people believe in and has great talent but was not being used. So, and that's okay, and I think that that's fair. I don't think that that's being unfair to Jurgen Klinsmann to point out when a guy like Benny Feilhaber in that moment when you need a moment of magic is there, or a Sasha Kljestan. And by the way, when it comes to Sasha Kljestan, all right, the only reason that Sasha Kljestan was a part of the national team of late was because of a last-minute injury and a call-up. So the last couple of years, I still look at Sasha Kljestan in the same way that I look at Benny Feilhaber in terms of a player with talent that was not being used. And it doesn't mean that Jurgen Klinsmann had to use every single talent. I've always said it's about personal opinion, who a coach likes or doesn't like, and there's going to be, regardless of who is in charge, some players, and maybe even some very good players that just don't fit into the mix.
All right. So then, we're speaking of very good players who may or may not fit in. So we've talked about like kind of that, like the Klinsmann mentality, like the Klinsmann impact on this team. And in my opinion, it seems like for the longest time there was a contingent of U.S. fans that were in the keep Klinsmann camp, and there were a contingent that were in the fire Klinsmann camp. Now, obviously, that's more or less settled, and it seems like it's kind of flipped into drop Bradley versus keep Bradley. And it seems like those kind of camps are similar. It seems like the people who were against Klinsmann or for Klinsmann thought he was doing an okay job were the ones who were inclined to blame the players and thus blame players like Michael Bradley. And it seems like if you were in the Klinsmann isn't doing a good enough job, then you kind of tended to support Michael Bradley. So I'm curious where you see Michael Bradley fitting in this U.S. team going forward and what your thoughts are on Bradley as a whole.
I think that over the last 5 years, we've spent trying to fit Michael Bradley into a position that he is, I think, obviously uncomfortable with, and that is a more advanced midfield position. I screamed and yelled about it for 5 years. I think Michael Bradley is a mediocre player when he's pushed into a more advanced, creative type of role and responsibility. I think he's world class when he's in front of a back four. What's happened though over the last couple of games here is we find Michael Bradley now almost playing as a center back, and so he's gone the completely opposite direction. I want Michael Bradley in that pocket and in that seam when the U.S. comes out of the back. I think when he is there, I think he can be world class. I don't need him more advanced, and I don't want him coming back and taking the ball off center back's feet. Not just Michael Bradley, I hate when players do that. I think it's a complete waste of energy and resources, and it messes everything up. Now, I have been one of Michael Bradley's champions over the last number of years because I do think that he is an important component and a really smart player that you need on the field for the U.S. Having said that, you need better out of Michael Bradley, and I have given him the benefit of the doubt. I am going to be very, very, if the case warrants it, critical of Michael Bradley going forward if he continues to underwhelm and not play that position in the way that I think makes the team better and ultimately plays to Michael Bradley's strengths. You're in a situation right now where we talked so much about players being out of their comfort zone. I want to see players in their comfort zone doing what they're good at and being given the confidence to be the best at what they're good at, with the recognition that we all have frailties and we all have things that we're not good at, and trying to avoid those things. So Michael Bradley, I think, needs to be on the field, but it's not a situation where Michael Bradley can't be taken off the field. If he doesn't play the position in the way that I think that he's best, then, in my opinion, I'm going to call him out for it, and I'm going to call the team out and say you got to make a change, because the problem with Michael Bradley is if he is not playing that position in the right way, he risks being detrimental to the team in the way that he plays it in the wrong way.
Interesting. Okay, so two quick clarifications there, or follow-ups there. Number one, so what is it specifically that you don't like about that kind of holding number 6 dropping between the center backs? Is it that it stretches the team? Is it that it slows things down? Is it some combination of the two, or is it something else entirely?
Well, I think it's disrespectful to center backs. I mean, I am just as able.
I forgot the defenders talking. Yeah.
Yeah. I am more than comfortable and able to play a 10 or 20-yard ball that bypasses two of my opponents. Okay. What I need is a midfielder who's comfortable getting the ball in that seam, turning under pressure, getting out of pressure, and then spraying the ball up to the creative types who are in that next advanced position. But if you take that person out of that responsibility, then there's a huge hole, and somebody else has to come back and fill it, and usually it will be a creative person coming back now another 10 or 20 yards into a situation where I lose that advanced position of a creative midfielder, and I don't want that. I think it messes up the structure and the balance of a team when somebody does that. And I would rather have center backs, and I believe the U.S. has center backs that are able to do that on a consistent basis.
So, and then you mentioned that he's not untouchable, and I believe you also used the term underwhelmed, or he's underwhelming at times. So what is it? Is it just that kind of proclivity to drop back and maybe not turn and go at the opposition midfield that you find underwhelming, or are there other aspects of his game?
Well, either dropping back and doing what somebody else can do and what people are already there to do.
Right.
That would be irritating, and I guess fall into the underwhelming category. And then on the opposite end, trying to do too much in terms of hitting that killer pass that Benny Feilhaber or somebody else is designed to hit. And then But I think maybe if you're talking to Michael Bradley and when he started to play in a much more defensive type of midfield position, you're getting away from that, which is a good thing. But if he reverts back and starts to push forward and tries to do too much, I mean, Michael Bradley is best when he edits himself and when he understands that less is more. And not just best, I believe he can be world class when he does that. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't do it enough. And to be fair to Michael Bradley, at times he's been told and been asked to do things that, as I said, he is not comfortable with. But any one of us, especially when you're asked to go in a more advanced position, we're going to do it. Every center back thinks that they can play midfield. Every center back thinks that they can go up top and score goals. And when you give them that carte blanche to do it, they're not going to say, no, I couldn't possibly. They're going to take it and they're going to go, even though we all know that 99.999% of them get weaker and worse the more advanced they get.
All right. All of that makes sense, but I do have one final question about Michael Bradley, and then we'll move on to other topics, I promise. The other thing, okay. the other thing that I brought up on the show that I think some people disagreed with was and maybe because I think people think I'm inclined to apologize for Michael Bradley. I don't think I am, but I've heard that accusation. Is I had this idea that maybe under Jurgen Klinsmann, he was doing more of the tactical adjustments in the game, that he was kind of the one who was maybe in the game coaching. I'm not going to say he was coaching, but I'm going to say he was the one who I think was identifying what the opposition team was doing, trying to adjust it on the fly. I think if you are doing that in a game, if you take that as maybe what was actually happening, it makes it really difficult for you to do that role and also fulfill your role as a midfielder. And I feel like now he's kind of transitioning back into what comes naturally, and that takes a little bit more time. But I think we will start to see him progress from there. But I guess you having, covered the team differently from, more in-depth in person, I'm curious if you think that that's a fair characterization of what was happening with Michael Bradley, at least near the end of Jurgen Klinsmann's coaching tenure, or if you think I'm maybe just giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, not only are you giving him the benefit of the doubt, but you are christening him. And let's just say it. I mean, that's where I think people where you need to come clean. You're being a little disingenuous. Basically, what you just said, or the way that I hear it, is you just called Michael Bradley the coach of the national team.
Pretty much.
And we can have a whole podcast on that. Mm-hmm. First thing, and I think you recognize this, and if you don't, well, you do. Everybody recognizes that there is an element of coaching that happens for every player when they are on the field. Mm-hmm. But that coaching is based on a template and an understanding of this is how we are going to play, and then it's basically what we can call it coaching, but really it is adjustments on the fly that not only happen, but have to happen. And you need players on the field that are able to recognize those moments when they need to adjust. Mm-hmm. Now, if Michael Bradley is out there and fundamentally setting out and then adjusting as a coach on the field, I mean, that is a problem, and that is a huge indictment against the coach at this point, manager, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I guess at this point you would be calling it against Jurgen Klinsmann. Yeah. Now, this is not anything new in terms of accusations levied against Jurgen Klinsmann, is that he's much more of a big picture and a much more of a, let's say, a motivator and a sensei guru type of existence, as opposed to an X's and O's person. That's something that has followed Jurgen around forever. And I think that at times you probably can make a case for that. I do think that when it comes to Michael Bradley specifically, he is a cerebral type of player, and that's part of what makes him good. I think that he does adjust and he does lead, and we can use it, coach in ways on the mm-hmm. field that can help. If you're saying that that's detrimental to what he needs to be doing, I get that, because I don't want my players constantly thinking about how to change what's going on out there if they're not referencing it back to a template and a fundamental principle and understanding of philosophy that comes from the coaching staff. And if that's your accusation, I'm not in there, so I don't know mm-hmm. exactly, but I can make an argument, and I don't think that is you being unfair. It's what you see from the side. Mm-hmm. I think it's legitimate. Using it specifically to excuse or bolster your case for Michael Bradley, I don't even think you need to use that, to be quite honest, because I think that Michael Bradley stands on himself, and maybe we're both being Bradley apologists in the way that we go about looking at Michael Bradley. And Michael Bradley doesn't walk on water, believe me.
Yeah.
And I am very positive about Michael Bradley, and I think the team needs and can be very, very good under Michael Bradley. But as I said before, he is not untouchable. But it's not because I don't think his problems in the past were because he was having to coach the U.S. national team while playing for the U.S. national team.
Okay. That I appreciate that, and I appreciate your calling me out. Well done. I'm also glad that people have learned on this show that, through my own creations, I think that Jordan Morris is better than Diego Maradona. Michael Bradley's the coach of the national team. Perfect. We're getting all the big news turned over today. Another thing that I wanted to talk with you.
Super pod.
Yeah, exactly. Breaking news left and right. Another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Because you obviously have been there, both in terms of as an analyst. I know you've covered the U.S. team in camp, but you've also been in camps like the January camp where you've got kind of these, a couple weeks to get everybody together to play a friendly. And I think maybe part of the other problem that we had, or part of the reason why we were down a little bit, is because maybe we had certain expectations about they're going to know how to play, they're going to play this way, you're going to see differences, you're going to see structure. And I think maybe it wasn't quite as cut and dry as we would have liked. I'm speaking for Daryl here as well. But I also wonder if that's because we had sort of an unrealistic expectation of what happens in those 3 weeks in camp. So from your experience, what goes on in those camps? Is it a lot of bonding? Is it a lot of learning how to play within the manager's style? Is it some combination thereof? What is it for you, or what has it been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in this one in particular, and they're all different and unique, I think in this one in particular, it was less about X's and O's and style as opposed to setting a fundamental philosophy about how this team is going to go about its business. And in doing so, I think Bruce Arena being very different about the way he approaches his interaction with players, the responsibility, the way that they are going to look at themselves and the message that they are going to send as a team outwardly, all of those different things. And some of those things have nothing to do necessarily with actually kicking the ball, but can be very, very important. And let's understand that as a national team coach, you have very limited time. This was actually an aberration for Bruce Arena to come in and have this amount of time, albeit with not his full team. And keep in mind, Bruce Arena is probably going to have one training session with the likes of Christian Pulisic whoever else is coming from Europe.
Bobby Wood, Jeff Cameron, John Brooks, all those guys. Yeah,
he will have talked to them, but he will never have trained them by the time they get in March up in San Jose for the qualifier. So that's not great preparation for an X's and O's and tactically how you're going to play. So I think that this camp was probably much more about, I think we've gotten away from what makes us, for lack of a better word, and I know this is a loaded word, great as a team, as a team representing, in my estimation, the greatest country in the world. And so I think Bruce Arena wanted to get back and say, we're not Spain, we're not Germany, we're not England, we're not any of these. We're the United States, and we have a history, and we have a history of success, and we have a history that we can tap into, and we can use, and we can get better and be a better, or dare I say it, the best version of ourselves. And it doesn't mean that you can't progress. It doesn't mean you can't evolve. But I think, and this is all from the outside, I think the message probably was, we threw the baby out with the bathwater, and let's get back to what we were, and in doing so, we can move forward. Now, I mean, that I think probably was the message in camp. I will tell you that it is a completely different type of experience covering this team now as opposed to under Jurgen Klinsmann. And it's by design. And it's no surprise to me that U.S. Soccer and Bruce Arena have gone out of their way to be more transparent. I mean, they invited me out to camp. They sat me down on the bench. Bruce Arena sat down, and we just shot the breeze on the side talking about the team. And this is by design. They recognize that this is also a battle for hearts and minds, and they're in a very good place and a positive place now where people are going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they are using that to their advantage. But ultimately, it's Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately? I don't care what you did in 2002, Bruce.
Yeah.
I care about making sure that you get that result and that 3 points, crucial 3 points, in March in San Jose against Honduras.
So looking forward to those World Cup qualifiers, what were the takeaways, either good or bad, from these two January friendlies, from this January camp as a whole, that you think the U.S. can look to, can use going forward in preparation for March or even in those games in March?
I think Legit is legit, and I think he could certainly play in that midfield role in advance of Michael Bradley, because we know that Jermaine Jones is not going to be available. Mm-hmm. I think a guy like Steve Birnbaum continues to have consistency and a composure that I think is something to consider. I don't think he's necessarily taking the job away from Jeff Cameron or Omar Gonzalez. All of these players, and I was saying this on the broadcast the other day, what you have to do in your time in these two games is plant the seed that I am better than who we perceive to be the starter in that position. Mm-hmm. So if you're Birnbaum, if you're Walkerman, you're saying to Bruce Arena, I'm better than the Omar Gonzalez option or the Brooks option. If you're Jorge Villafaña, I'm better than the Fabian Johnson possibility over there, or the Greg Garza option out there. All of these different things. Dax McCarty, I'm better than Michael Bradley. I don't think a lot of people necessarily they might have planted the seed, but I'm not sure that that seed ultimately grows in Bruce Arena's mind to the realization that they are. Mm-hmm. But I think Bruce Arena is inheriting a team with as much, and I would argue even more talent and probably more depth, I think is the word that I come up with constantly, than anybody has ever had as the national team coach. It's just a matter of fitting those pieces together. But I think right now you got a Yedlin coming in that I think is the right back that people are going to turn to as they should. And when it comes to Michael Bradley, I think Legit up top. I think you're going to still have a Josie and Bobby Wood tandem up top, as you should. Christian Pulisic on one side. And then it's interesting on the other side because I think that Darlington Nagbe probably came out the big winner. Not that he's surprising Bruce Arena or anything, but once again, just kind of piquing everybody's interest. But it's still not enough from Darlington Nagbe. If this is as good as it gets, then we've already seen that. Mm-hmm. And we know that it has to be better. And once again, Darlington Nagbe, the potential is one thing, but living up to it is still, for me and many others, the question of whether he can do it on a consistent basis, because there's undeniable talent. I mean, that's not mm-hmm. even a question.
So then looking at what Arena's trying to do with this team, so you mentioned that depth, and I wonder if there becomes a time when depth is almost a detriment when you're Bruce Arena trying to organize this team in a pretty quick time period, in a pretty tight space. That does he have to look at this as, oh, Greg Garza, you didn't have the best first half, so you're out of consideration for the next year or so? Or is it kind of a constantly evolving depth chart that he can kind of prune as he goes? Or is he trying to kind of get these things ironed out, sorted in time for those World Cup qualifiers and maybe the Gold Cup this summer?
Yeah, I mean, the Gold Cup really, I think, is where some of those questions and the advantage that Bruce Arena has, and where he can use to confirm or dispel some of the ideas that he may have right now. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's detrimental. I don't think depth is ever detrimental. I mean, the fact that we're talking about an 11 that is not going to have guys like Jossie Zardes, guys like, Clint Dempsey, possibly in the 11, possibly not in the 11. That's all good stuff. When you have a guy like Birnbaum, who we've talked about, has really come in and been and I think grabbed a hold of the opportunity, that he's going to be on the bench. And you still have guys that have been around now, whether it's Beasler, Zuzi, these types of players that have been around for a while. Still, I would include them in that depth. I don't think it's a bad thing. But don't think for a second that Bruce Arena isn't coming into San Jose with an 11 already penciled in his mind. He will have that already sorted out, and I think that's the right way to go, just because of time. He doesn't have time to do some of the things that Jurgen Klinsmann did, and he doesn't have a whole lot of time. And I don't think he's being asked to either. I mean, it is one responsibility. He's not in charge of development. He's not in charge of any of the youth teams or anything like that. This is fundamentally about getting the team to Russia, because not being in Russia, we all know, would just be devastating and completely detrimental to the program and to the sport.
So you say he's probably going to come in there with an 11 already in mind. In terms of that 11, the big question that I see, because I really don't know the answer to this, is who starts between the sticks. Because you've got Tim Howard coming back from injury, you've got Brad Guzan currently not really playing at all with Middlesbrough, obviously coming to Atlanta in the summer. Who do you think gets that start? Do you think it's one of those two? Do you think it's somebody else entirely? Because I'm really not entirely certain who he's going to favor.
I think it's Nick Rimando. I mean,
really,
I have no problem. I have no problem with Nick Rimando. I mean, if you're looking at a goalkeeper who can make the saves, but also is almost a 10.5 now field player, he brings almost, because of his ability with his feet, then Nick Rimando has always been the best with his feet and the best since Tony Meola. Brad Guzan is not playing. Tim Howard obviously is coming back from injury. Look, if they come in, either one of those two, and the fact that Tim Howard is coming back from injury, I don't think that that's necessarily a big problem. And the fact that Brad Guzan isn't playing, I don't think that's necessarily a big problem. But I have, it's hard. It's hard. I will tell you that I don't think the goalkeepers that were in camp amazed, and I don't think that they took the opportunity. But Nick Rimando's been in camp and been around for a long time, so you know exactly what you're getting. And Bruce Arena likes consistency. He likes players that he knows exactly what they're going to bring, even though it might not be the elite status. And Nick Rimando can make the saves. He's not elite, but who knows? I would have no problem Nick Rimando starting against Honduras, and I could see that happening without any doubt.
All right, well, there we are. I appreciate it. You've given me lots to think about then, because I was kind of undecided about that goalkeeper situation, but now I'm okay with Nick Rimando. And I think that might also be his first World Cup qualifying start as well, so I'd be okay with that too. I could be wrong on that, but he probably deserves it at this point.
So why are you down on Nick Rimando, or why are you up on Brad Guzan?
I'm not really. It's kind of, we've had this situation in which it's either been Tim Howard or Brad Guzan, however you want to go with. I still don't really know how to pronounce that one. But
the only reason I say Brad Guzan is when we started talking about him consistently, I went online and saw him say his name, and that's the reason why I say Guzan. So
there we go. Okay,
that's
good to know.
the only reason that I do it.
All right, that's cool. I'm writing it out phonetically right now. But it's basically, we've had the two of them as our two options for a very long time. And it's kind of, and it becomes almost like that becomes the norm. So then it's difficult to think about anybody else coming in there. So I really hadn't even given, I initially was going to say, do you think Nick Rimando starts? And I was like, no, he's probably not going to start. So I think it just takes that momentary, like, oh yeah, he could definitely do that, and that would be fine for that to become a reality. But before then, it was definitely obviously going to be between one of the two, of Howard or Guzan, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to I have no problem with any of the three starting. And that's easy to say about Tim Howard because of who Tim Howard is, and Brad Guzan because of the way that Brad Guzan came in when Tim Howard went away. But I equally have no problem with Nick Rimando, and certainly can see that happening given the circumstances right now. So we're in a wonderful place here, because I'm equally comfortable with all three of them, and I could see all three of them starting. Who has the advantage right now? If in that 11, like you said, in Bruce's mind, I think he's got Nick Rimando in there.
All right. And then final question, and then we'll get you going, even though hopefully the traffic has gotten you going at this point. I'm not sure where you are in relation to your...
This is traffic. It never ends. So.
All right, well, good. Well, then I'll ask you this. So we saw the two different formations that the U.S. trotted out in this January camp. What would you personally like to see the United States play in these upcoming World Cup qualifiers? Is it Josie up top by himself? Is it Josie and Bobby Wood as a front two? Is it a back four? Is it a back three? Is it Michael Bradley as that lone number one in a 4-1-4-1? I've given you many options. What would you most like to see out there?
I like two up top. I always have. I think it both from a tactical perspective gives us obviously more options, and I think puts the team in a more comfortable position. But I also like the message that it sends. And I know it's a little bit more traditional, but I also look at the personnel that the U.S. has and the comfort. Once again, putting players in comfort zones. I mean, even Josie Altidore made a point of talking about how he's much more comfortable with two players up there. And it doesn't mean that they have to stand right next to each other, but having two guys where you have articulated to them that this is your job and you are both up top. And the message that sends to your team and the message that sends outwardly, I think that's important. And I do like a 4-4-2. And when I say 4-4-2, I mean, obviously the 4 in the back doesn't change. And how the 4 sets up in the midfield really is where we get into the weeds and we start talking about formations. But ultimately, it's 4 guys in the midfield, I like having a definitive type of more advanced and attacking and creative, if you will, center type of midfielder in front of a more stay-at-home defensive type of defensive midfield in there. So it ends up being, it can be a diamond, it can be boxy at times, all that kind of stuff. But they move through different things in different formations. But ultimately, for me, it comes down to a 4-4-2 with the personnel dictating when everybody else screams and yells and says, well, it's really a 4-1-3-2, or it's really a 4-1-2-1-2. I don't know what it ends up being.
Well, Alexi, thank you for taking the time. Thank you, as always, for listening. And I was initially going to say sorry for making you scream into the wilderness and frighten small children when you run, but it actually sounds like you kind of enjoy that. So I'm just going to say you're welcome, I guess. I don't know what to say with that one.
Yeah, I scream on my runs and into the wilderness, whether I'm listening to podcasts.
I see.
Or
okay,
not.
Cool. Gotcha.
It happens. But you should never apologize for providing me and so many others content that makes us think, that is done in an informative and entertaining way, and it is done consistently day in and day out. Kudos to you guys for what you do. I love the show and have for many, many years now. And whether I agree or disagree, as I said before, is irrelevant, because I can agree, I can disagree, but one thing I can't do is stop playing it. So continue on.
I appreciate that. And as always, since you're talking to me right now and not Daryl, I'm going to assume that you are addressing those comments specifically to me and not Daryl. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay,
I've never heard of Daryl. Who is this Daryl?
Exactly. That is the correct response. I'm glad.
You guys are great. My best to both of you.
Cheers. Thanks, Alexi. Really appreciate it.
No problem.